So just because neocons and a bunch of, liberals are criticizing Biden for not helping spread feminism in Afghanistan, and, neocons are like, why are you taking out terrorists? Doesn't mean that Joe Biden is actually doing anything. It doesn't mean that it's not a planned strategic handoff, because this is exactly what it is. This has been long in the making. There is nothing that gets done in our government that is not strategically planned when it comes to the military industrial complex and state agencies. Like, that is my whole analysis on this. Like, that is not, this is not a win for imperialism, against imperialism. This is imperialism. What's happening, and the next few moves, that Biden has the move Biden has made thus far, were already planned. And I think other people are trying to give him a credit for supposedly ending a war. He's not ending anything.
Yeah, and it's really not his place, fan, to say, "Oh, I'm ending the war." There hasn't been a war that's come along that Biden hasn't loved and fell in love with, including having a surge in Afghanistan in 2007, which we'll revisit down the road. And that speech was just a bunch of crap there. Once again, not talking about the actual issues and what happened. Not really just telling the American people what they need to hear, which was, we should have never been involved in the first place.
Right.
And the people who are taking over this whole, now the Taliban is awful, this is bad. And yes, they are a ruthless...
Yes.
Ultra-conservative, Islamic theocratic freaking government that beats women, that doesn't encourage young girls to actually get an education. The education they provide for their children is all theocratic, warlord mentality education as well. But that's the monster that we created.
Right.
And we have to understand that this is what we created. And anybody who is part of the problem, who caused the problem, really should stay the fuck out of the solution, fam. And really, there's a lot of things we'll discuss today, what's going on. And yes, all these, unfortunately, progressive lefts, this is why we call some of them shit libs, right? Because they are awful in foreign policy. Awful. They don't understand the nuances of foreign policy. They haven't looked into Afghanistan. How many times on this show have we talked about Operation Mongoose and what the Taliban was kind of formed out of, this Mujahideen movement? And I know we'll discuss it all today. And really, to tell you the truth, I took some notes on Biden's speech, but it just shit. I mean, even the fact that the clear goals, the nationalism, we went in there to get the bad guys, to get Al-Qaeda. And he mentioned twice that they got Osama bin Laden. Twice. He had to pat himself on the shoulder when this guy was all about the war years ago that led to $1 trillion. And people, the Taliban was at the gates the moment we were leaving. This was a failed policy years ago. This ain't something that's rapidly ending.
No. So let's get started, fam. Let's get started, because I really want to break down so people understand why this is, again, they make our job so hard. They make our job so hard because we have to, people just want to put giant paintbrushes on things, black and white, and there's no discussion of the nuances and the intricacies. So let's start.
Cool. So I just wanted to say, Afghanistan, how did we get here? How did the Taliban come in power? We'll do a little brief history, because I think a lot of neocons, especially when I talk to people who are Republicans, conservatives, and really whatnot, and they were all about, we got to kill them over there so we don't kill them over here, really didn't understand what Afghanistan was. Afghanistan was a multicultural, multi-ethnic country that was at the heart of the Silk Road. It led to everywhere from Asia to Europe to the Med. It's where a lot of people came with goods and whatnot and traded back in the old world. And I pulled up this great article that said, for centuries, Europe was, in world terms, a poverty-stricken and unimportant territory. That's what I don't tell you about Europe in school. Whereas the East was the lands of affluence, high-value international trade, and intellectual achievement. And in these areas, Afghanistan can claim to have been the leader of the East. Afghanistan can thank its geographical position for its wealth. It sits at the heart of Central Asia, and it was the melting pot and the meeting point of ancient trade routes known together as the Silk Road that go out to all parts of Asia. Some led east to China, some north to the great cities of Bukhara and I can't even say this word, Samarkand and Khiva, and then to the nomadic steppe. Some southeast to India and others into Iran, which led to the Mediterranean Sea and to Europe. Goods wanting to pass between any of these places had to go through Afghanistan, and thus Afghan cities, strategically placed in trade routes, were able to benefit massively as places of mercantile exchange, fam. It was just a beautiful place. It's where, and that's why there was so much culture there in Afghanistan, and we'll kind of show some of the things we're talking
Right,
about.
and Afghanistan is in Central Asia, as you said, not in West Asia, which is West Asia is what we refer to in the West as the Middle East. So Afghanistan, like Pasta said, is positioned geographically in an area where there's so much access to everything, which is why the United States, of course, has always been so insistent. And that also relates to Iran, Iran, and China, and of course Russia, because a lot of the attacks and a lot of the hold on Afghanistan has been related to those three large superpowers, because that's who we view as our enemy.
Yeah, and well, like we talk about that culture too. Even Chinese monks, fam, that were going into India to study Buddhism and learn about Buddhism and trade with the India, stayed in Afghanistan, and so much culture was there. That's why it's just like a place unlike any other country in the Middle East. And the 1970s, we talk about Afghan, the hippie trail. This is a little article that was just cut out, a little movie cut out. I've been like watching so many of my old stuff that I used to love Afghanistan, just learning about it, because once we went in there, I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, I didn't understand Afghanistan as a whole at 9/11, and then I just dove into it, trying to understand the people, all the wars there and whatnot. This is something called the hippie trail, because in the 1970s, fam, once again, Afghan being that place where a lot of hippies would come from Europe. They would go into Afghanistan before going into India. They would meet and hang in Afghanistan. It was a monarchy at the time, but there was, I think, hashish was legal, so a lot of hippies hung out there, and it was all these different cultures. So here's a little video, and you can see the modernization back in the 60s, and the late 60s and the early 70s of Kabul.
Film footage from the 1970s paints a very different picture of Afghanistan to the one we've become accustomed to. It was a time when Kabul was famed as an exotic stop-off point on the hippie trail between Europe and India.
That was the golden period of the Afghan, because at that 10 years, I think everything was flourishing.
Professor Ahmad Javid was Chancellor of Kabul University at the time.
Afghanistan was, from the tourist point of view, a kind of paradise. You could come across different cultures of different ages. There was a chance to see a life or a culture which just resembled 2,000 years back, and also you could come across a very, very modern society, a modern family life, which would look like Europeans. Cheap hotels, where everybody used to turn his house as a hotel, and mostly they were full of the young ones who they come to across the world. Most the hippies, they felt very, very free in that country, because they could come across of the hashish, and the hashish to sell, it was not forbidden. I'm sure you will not come across of any Afghan at that age to have asked asylum at any country in the world. It means to them to be an asylum seeker, it was a shame.
So that was the beauty of Afghanistan back in the days, and it should be a country today. Like, if it wasn't torn by outside influences, that it would be just a tourist spot. They would go there to see Afghanistan and the beautiness of it, and all these different countries where people met there to trade, and it should be what it was becoming. But during the Cold War, fam, Russia and United States. Go ahead. I don't want to.
No. Yeah, you're right. It was the Soviet Union, and then after that, it was people started escaping to Pakistan and then the United States, and then of course it was the Taliban.
Yeah.
But what we have to really note here, and what we're going to talk about, is that the Taliban was a creation like a coalition between Pakistan and the CIA of the United States created the Taliban.
Yeah.
And that is something that we have to repeat because people still don't understand that. They still
Yeah.
think like the Taliban is just it would be where it was today, and we had like without our influence, and it wouldn't the Taliban, in
not at
the
all.
essence of it was a creation of the CIA. And another thing I want to point out is that you were right, back then Afghanistan was a beautiful place. This is something that always stuck with me when I read the book The Kite Runner. And that book of course took place throughout it was a historical fiction, but the historical part was the fall of the monarchy, and then the Soviet Union intervention, and then of course the Taliban. So you can see all of it in history, and you can see how Afghanistan in the 70s was a very, very advanced civilized nation, and after the US involvement and the Taliban specifically, of course, the Cold War before it, I mean, just the pictures, it's just devastating to see how it went from one thing to another, and that was all a result of imperialism.
Yep. And just building on that, in 1979, when the Soviet Union invaded, there was a communist party, a small communist party within Afghanistan that they supported, just turning the country into chaos. The United States then decided, because geopolitical ways, they wanted to do the same thing in which happened to them in Vietnam. They wanted to thrust onto the Soviet Union, which led them to supporting the Mujahideen. The Mujahideen eventually is what the Taliban was spawned out of. Now, the Mujahideen were the most crazy, fanatical, jihadists in that area. And the United States knew that. They didn't care, fam, because as long as they were taking down, Soviet Union planes and, financially destroying the Soviet Union, they had no problem in smuggling in Stinger missiles. This is Operation Mongoose with the Uyghurs, whatnot. So what the Mujahideen became was eventually the Taliban. It was spawned out of the Mujahideen, and we knew then, fam, that we were supporting the most ruthless clan out there. Let me read this little article from this one article from 1979 to 1989, which was the time the Russians were there. The Americans supported the Mujahideen, Islamic rebels, in their fight against the Soviet Union's invasion. The Americans supported the rebels as a means of inflicting their own Vietnam on the Soviet Union. The decision sending weapons to the anti-communist rebels helped turn the tide of the war in the rebels' favor and doom the Soviet Union. And later, the United States of America. American support for rebels in Afghanistan was the number one mistake of Carter and Reagan's foreign policy blunders that hurt America and Israel. Also, Saudi Arabia was involved with America and Israel in smuggling those weapons in. The U.S. decision to support the rebels in Afghanistan was strategic miscalculation and the wrong way to overcome our defeat in Vietnam. This was known as Vietnam Syndrome, which haunts America to this day, fam. So we created this monster. We gave the worst jihadist the power to eventually take that power vacuum and take a hold of power in Afghanistan. And then we went in to fight them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's lunacy.
Yeah. And just to show you a little bit, I just want to show this thing is when the Taliban had taken over, they once again just enacted Sharia law, very just demeaning to women, abusing women, but also culture. They wanted any other type of culture out of there. There was these statues, these Buddhist statues that were in Afghanistan that the Taliban destroyed, and they were just centuries old. And they were part of like Greek art and Indian influence of, Buddhist statues. So I just put up a little video real quick, and we can just look at the clip of them just destroying these statues. There's the beautiful statues. Been there for centuries. They blew it up. They destroyed it. And those were all the Buddhist caves with paintings, whatnot. They looked at these people as infidels. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, this is like ultra conservative Islamic theocrats that took over the country by our help. And you also put here, let's not forget.
Yeah, so I wanted us not to forget. Did you want to show that picture?
Well, I can show it after, but it was
Okay.
just a picture. Yeah, we'll show it after.
Oh, okay. I put this tweet because so many on the left are giving Biden accolades for doing what the strategic move was. Okay. So he said, this is Kyle Kalinske, ending a war that previous president and only talked about ending in response to where is Joe Biden, right?
The GOP.
So he's giving accolades to Joe Biden. He had another tweet where he was saying becoming a Biden bro.
Yeah, we have that.
And all this. Okay. So I said, you have lost your goddamn mind. This is a planned strategy, classic U.S. playbook. The U.S. created the Taliban and is now making arrangements with them after years of destabilizing the region in an attempt to affect our enemies in China, Russia, Iran. You sound like a neocon. And I want to clarify this part because without the U.S. involvement via the CIA, the Taliban wouldn't have be as powerful as it is today or be the essence of who they really are, because the U.S. helped create a destabilized Afghanistan. And it has essentially killed millions. And if you go to this article, you can read here. Osama bin Laden created by the U.S. Bin Laden is a product of U.S. spy agencies. Okay. And we all know this. We've talked about this at nauseum. But here it is. I think this article was from the Times of India. The Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, worked in tandem with Pakistan to create the monster that is today Afghanistan's ruling Taliban. A leading U.S. expert on South Asia said here. And you can read the article, but here it is. They said Harrison was this person, Sadiq Harrison, from the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. And they said the CIA made a historic mistake in encouraging Islamic groups from all over the world to come to Afghanistan. The U.S. provided $3 billion for building up these Islamic groups, and it accepted Pakistan's demand that they should decide how this money should be spent. Okay. And here it is. The assault on the Buddha statues was launched. We just showed that. And guys, like this is common knowledge. It's just not out there. Like it's not, you can't just you kind of have to look for it. It should be more out there, but you guys should read more into that. I mean, we're kind of going over it now, but I just wanted to show you guys that this is undeniable, that what the United States via the CIA and of course working with Pakistan also did create the radicalization of the Taliban. The Taliban would not be who they are today without our influence. Yeah. And when you're praising Joe Biden, one of the people who has been instrumental in various regime change wars, various coups, has never, as Pasta says, found a war he did not like. Yeah. Okay, for doing something that is obviously just theatrics to make it look like we are ending a war when we're not. It's just as especially Kyle Kalinske, who has millions of followers and so many subscribers. Like, I mean, to me, it's just like irresponsible because you're completely missing everything else. Yeah. You're missing the entire historical context. He's acting like a neocon. Like, it seems like a moment of revelation for me, for a lot of the left. Marianne Williamson had a bunch of things she was saying too. I didn't even put that in there, but yeah. You
know what it reminds me of, fam? It reminds me of when a bunch of Republicans were like, we got Saddam Hussein. Right. I'm like, was that worth destabilizing the whole fucking Middle East and killing over 1 million Iraqis, or that were either murdered or misplaced? I mean, was that worth it to get this one Ba'athist party guys that we supported? We put Saddam in power too. It's like we do this all the fucking time. And this next picture I have up, remember when we saw this picture just recently, guys, at our friend's house? I'm like, guys, look at this picture of that National Geographic of this young lady in Afghanistan. She just took off her burqa for a second, like her veil by her face, and the photographer snapped the picture and stuff. And when I first saw this picture, I was so confused. I was like, this is the Middle East and whatnot. And they're like, oh no, Afghan culture is different. It's a melting pot over there of all these different ethnicities and cultures and religion. And just look at that picture says so much, how the eyes are radiant. You know what I'm saying? Because I think a lot of conservatives that I used to talk to when we were first went into Afghanistan, they didn't realize what Afghanistan was.
Yeah.
They thought it was just another Islamic
Country in the Middle
theocracy
East.
with
Yeah.
a bunch of Arabs, whatnot. It's like, no, Afghan was not like that. Afghanistan was not like that. And this person, that picture is just so indicative of the culture that was in Afghanistan that we helped destroy. We helped destroy it. So there is no both siding it now with Joe Biden coming out, talking out of his ass on both sides of this situation.
Yeah, he's saying he still made sure, by the way, in that speech that you all heard, he made sure to reiterate that if we don't get, if they don't do what we want, we have no problem. If we get attacked or if we feel in danger, we're going to go after them. Like, he made sure to reiterate. And also, one thing I wanted to note about that speech that I forgot to mention was that he signaled to the different kind of foreign policy, which isn't very different from the Trump administration to this one under Anthony Blinken. We know that Anthony Blinken is using the whole humanitarian aid, spreading democracy, which is the cryptic type of military interventionism. Because, again, it doesn't mean it's not there. It just means they're going to frame it as military, as a, pro-feminist, we have to save the Afghan women, and all of this type of interventionism. So don't think that it's not going to happen, because Biden has continued sending thousands of troops to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And like I said, a lot of these troops, a lot of the types of soldiers or agencies he's sending are not, they're special operations. They're not like military. So you're not going to be able to count those.
Yeah, yeah. And also the fact that he was able to blame Trump. Some of the stuff he was saying in the troops, he goes, when Trump took over and he was working out a deal, the Taliban as strongest as they were since 2001. Like, bullshit. Don't start that shit. He's trying to put it on, like, Trump, that he gave the Taliban the power, whatnot. He's trying to look stronger, whatnot. No, this is 20 fucking years. There's nothing rapid about the way this unfolded. Nothing rapid. This is 21 years of failed policy. We shouldn't have been in there in the first place. And no matter what's to come, and yes, it's going to get a little worse before it gets better, but no matter what, the first thing we need to do is get the hell out. But I'm not going to get this here and give Biden the credit for doing this. You know what I'm saying? The Democrats stopped Trump and Rand Paul from trying to do this years ago too as well. Not to give him and lift up Donald Trump like, he's some hero, because he didn't get it fucking done. Bottom line, people, he did not get it done. But Joe Biden was for the war before he was against it, so he doesn't get to play both sides and act like he's now the savior of frickin' Afghanistan. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. You have this Sky News thing here, fam.
Yeah, I think he was just showing it. They were just scuffles breaking out at Kabul airport after commercial departures were abruptly halted Sunday, and hundreds have been waiting at the airport to board evacuation flights after the Taliban seized all major cities in Afghanistan. So they're just showing some of what was happening there. And then I think
Caitlin Johnstone.
you had Caitlin Johnstone's article, correct?
Nope. Was that you, Johnny? I did not put Caitlin Johnstone's Substack in there.
Okay.
But she does have some good stuff.
So let me just read her tweet. The Afghanistan shenanigans, she did the Substack. She said, this entire mess is a result of a bunch of imperialists deciding that the entire planet needs to be dominated by a single power structure, that it's fine to play with human lives like chess pieces to make that happen. And she talks about the Afghanistan shenanigans. But I mean, essentially, yes. Essentially, yes. Here, I want to read this part then, actually. It's long been obvious to anyone paying attention that the Taliban would regain control of the country when occupying Western powers withdrew, but I don't think anyone would have put money on it happening this quickly. A few interesting questions that have come up about this, like, for example, how hilarious it would be if after spending 20 years and trillions of dollars and thousands of human lives fighting the Taliban would suddenly resume power as a U.S. puppet regime. I mean, what's going on here? That actually is what's happening. This is my analysis of the situation, that the United States has made a deal with Afghanistan, with the Taliban. that the United States has made a deal with the Taliban. I don't know if you agree with this, but I feel the United States has made a deal with the Taliban, and this is why they're strategically pulling troops out, and they're strategically making Joe Biden look like he is some sort of, anti-imperialist, and ending this war that Donald Trump couldn't end, because that plays into the playbook. And of course that the Taliban in control will be a puppet government for the U.S. interests. That's what I see happening here, 100%. And we'll see if that prediction comes true. But that's what I'm seeing based on the history and based on the geopolitical interests of the United States, because they what they wanted to do for so long was have the chaos and terrorism and all of the destabilization in Afghanistan spread into Iran and China and Russia and have that. So that is why I believe that the current Taliban control is going to be a puppet regime with the United States. So that's where I'm at. I don't know what you think of that.
I'm not there yet. You know what I'm saying? My eyes and ears are open to anything to see what's going on. I think that was just, it was bled too long over there. I mean, here's the thing. There are 3 countries that support the Taliban government last time they became a government before we threw them out. And that was Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and UAE. All right. The reason why is because they use Afghanistan as their toilet. They send their people there, their jihads there to train, whatnot. They provide them cover in Pakistan, the Pakistani Taliban. So no matter what, I think those 3 countries that are also allies of the United States will get the benefit by training their jihads over there in Afghanistan from these warlords and from the Taliban to be able to use them in other countries. For instance, a lot of people feel that, if you watch Indian TV today, they're screaming at Pakistan. Pakistan's going to take advantage of this. They're going to train more jihads in Afghanistan to be used to killed in India, right? So you'll hear that sentiment. Also, Osama bin Laden was from Saudi Arabia, but where did he go? He went to Afghanistan. He was killed where? In Pakistan. So, I mean, there's always going to be that alliance right there. So, I think that at the end of the day, as long as those 3 allies of the United States get what they want, that's why we'll be kind of okay with the withdrawal, being that we spent so much money, so much time, so many lives, that we just have no choice but to pull out. But yes, I think there's also a situation where, I don't know. I think Biden is looking pretty fucking dumb right now when he's pulling out, and the fact that they're sitting there waiting at the gates going, okay, are you leaving yet? And the Taliban is taking over immediately. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? It might look a little bad on Biden, but you know what I'm saying? I think we have to just put this on U.S. foreign policy as a whole. They didn't know what they were doing in there. They didn't know how they were going to hold on to things. The natural resources that come there. There's a lot of opioids that come from there. There's some oil that comes from there. It just has a lot remains to be seen to what's going to happen. But any way you look at it, it is a foreign policy blunder, a failure to the highest degree. 21 fucking years there, trillions of dollars, multiple lives, and nothing has changed. We're right back where we started from 21 years ago. The Taliban was in control when we went in there. We're leaving. The Taliban's going to be in control the moment we leave, the day we leave. Not even a struggle and a battle for the government, right? When the Russians left, it was 3 years before the Taliban got control.
Yeah,
we left, and they're back in control right away.
I just have a hard time thinking that the U.S. is just relinquishing control without a deal being made. I just don't see that as part of the current U.S. CIA regime change playbook. They're not just going to leave without getting anything in return. So I said, we'll see what happens in regard to that, fam. Citizens Return Home. I think if you played it. Yeah, so this is just the Afghan citizens coming home as a border crossing with Pakistan reopened. So they're also crossing into Pakistan like they were doing years ago. Yeah.
They go back and forth between the border. A lot. There's a Pakistan Taliban that doesn't want the Pakistani government running, so they go back and forth. And I just think people return back and forth across the lines. But yeah, I mean, they go into Pakistan, a lot of them for cover. That's where when Osama bin Laden was on the run, he went to Pakistan. He held out there for years before the United States government went to Pakistan and got him.
So, Pasta, you had a tweet here.
Yeah, I have the Joe Biden tweet right over here when it says, when Joe Biden sits there and comes out in a speech and says, "I was always against this," you're crazy, right?
Yeah.
Did we also have the Biden bro one? Was that before this one?
No, that was.
It was after this one.
We never showed it. So
No.
Okay. He says, gradually morphing into a Biden bro as I see all the political media and every wing of the two major parties go after him for the best thing he ever did. For the best thing he ever did. Listen to the way they're framing this shit. That's why, you got to believe that some people got a couple checks here and there to really push this fucking bullshit narrative out there. This is just a crock of shit.
It's just so generalized, empty analysis. Like there's nothing there. Like,
well, let's put a little bit of analysis on the other side over here. Let's show Joe Biden. This is Joe Biden in 2007. You tell me if he was for not going to war with Afghanistan.
That's the source of my anger about this president and his policies. If we surge troops anywhere, it should be in Afghanistan. And the reason for that is, and I'm telling you more than I know you know this, but there's no easy way to deal with these incredibly complicated and consequential issues. When I was in Afghanistan last, sitting with a British general, I said, "General, how long do you think your parliament's going to allow you to stay?" He said, "Senator, we have a expression in my country. As long as the big dog's in the pen, the small dogs will stay. But once the big dog's gone, the small dogs won't stay. It totally depends on you, Senator, and your commitment of your country here." Well, guess what? NATO has taken on the responsibilities it should for Afghanistan. But as we have denuded the forces in Afghanistan for purposes of engaging in a civil war in Iraq, what has happened? You've had the Germans and you've had others in NATO now constraining the role of their soldiers in that area so they cannot be aggressive. They cannot be proactive. And so there's a direct relationship. We can have a 4-to-1 multiplier to the troops if we make it clear to the Europe that we've made the commitment to Afghanistan and to rebuild it, which is incredibly cheaper than what's going on here. They will participate. But if we don't, they're saying, "Whoa, wait a minute, man. You're telling me this is not that important and you're asking me to send more troops?" It's a direct correlation.
Did you hear when he came out in a speech today? He said it was never about nation building. And then right over here, he's talking directly. If we can do this, this is where we got to surge troops, and this is where we got to do more nation building. He just contradicts himself and lies all the fucking time. A lot of people don't want you to see this video of him right now because Joe Biden's going around. I was always for pulling out of Afghanistan. I was never about Afghanistan. Bullshit. You're a friggin' liar. You were always for Afghanistan. You were always about nation building. You talked about NATO being involved. Germany, who's lost so many troops in Afghanistan, also has a bunch of refugees in Afghanistan, and that's the next thing to pay attention to. What's going to happen to the refugees? You're going to say that, we're going to allow the refugees to stay here, whatnot, in this state and that state, and blah, blah, blah. Bullshit. They're going to put them on temporary status, and they're going to send a lot of refugees back to Afghanistan to get killed. That's what's going to happen. And also, let's talk a little bit more about that role in Pakistan, fam, when it comes to Afghanistan. This particular a journalist, he a little mainstreamy kind of Europe. He was in CNN for a little while, Europe. But he do some work with some indigenous cultures, whatnot, and he's been paying a lot of attention for years over in Afghanistan. This is a little bit talking about that role of Pakistan in Afghanistan, because the next step we need to do is, people are like, we have to do something. Yeah, we have to encourage Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE to stop funding the Taliban's terror organization. If we get those three countries to stop on the back end, then there might be something organic within their own country of Afghanistan to create a government that isn't just ruled by the theocrats that are getting backed by these big countries that want to enforce their ways and have their jihadists trained in Afghanistan. Take a look.
Well, let's talk about the role of Pakistan. You, a decade ago, Stan, spent time embedded with Pakistan troops, and they were at that point battling the Taliban. But now Pakistan is considered to be supporting the Taliban. Is there a lot of credibility to that idea?
Oh, most definitely there is. And even when I was there reporting out of Afghanistan and Pakistan, Pakistan was playing a deadly double game here. Pakistan has long been accused of playing off the United States, of which it is meant to be allied, with its support for militant insurgencies. The militants, the Taliban and others, are often seen as a form of strategic depth when it comes to Pakistan's big battle, its existential crisis, this existential standoff with India. And it sees the Taliban and the Taliban returning to control in Afghanistan as a way of providing a buffer between Pakistan and India to not allow India to get greater support inside Afghanistan itself. Now, you rightly pointed out at the start there that Imran Khan says he wants to see this settled in Afghanistan by Afghans. But the reality is there is a long history of the Pakistan supporting the Taliban, both funding the Taliban. It emerged out of the madrasas, the Islamic schools in Pakistan. Pakistan has been a home for Taliban leadership. Even now, it's accused of sheltering Taliban leaders, of allowing them to arm themselves and then move back across the border into Afghanistan. One of the really critical things here, Beth, is that the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan essentially doesn't exist. It's known as the Durand Line. But to Pashtun people, and that's where the Taliban emerges out of, on both sides of that border effectively does not exist. Now, the danger for Pakistan is that while it may support the Taliban inside Afghanistan and may play that to its own ends, it's always faced its own battle with the Pakistani Taliban. And the Pakistani Taliban have often sought to overthrow the government in Islamabad. So it is a deadly embrace. On the one hand, playing a Taliban off against others that supposedly allied with the United States, supporting Taliban on one side, battling Taliban on the other. It has a tiger by the tail. But Pakistan is absolutely critical to any outcome here. It helped bring the Taliban to the negotiating table. It is absolutely critical to what happens from here.
And Imran Khan is also...
So that's, and in this little article I pulled up over here, a lot of people in Pakistan blame a lot of people in Afghanistan blame what's going on in Pakistan for a lot of their problems. It says some Afghans blame neighboring Pakistan for Taliban gains and, assisting. And pretty much I'm just going to read the one paragraph. It says, as the Taliban swiftly capture territory in Afghanistan, many Afghans blame Pakistan for the insurgent success, pointing to their use of Pakistani territory in multiple ways. Pressure is mounting on Islamabad, which initially brought the Taliban to the negotiating table to get them to stop the onslaught and go back to talks. So you can see there's an influence from, a lot of people feel that Pakistan has a big influence. A lot of people feel that Saudi Arabia has a big influence and the UAE, and that has to stop. So the first thing we need to do, fam, is pull out. We have to do that regardless. You know what I'm saying? I wish it was done a long time ago. And yeah, I don't want to hear your shit right now that we're doing this for generations to come. But with that being said, the next thing we have to do is we have to urge these three countries, because these are the three countries, the only three countries that recognized the Taliban when the Taliban took power after the Soviets, 3 years after the Soviet puppet government fell. And we have to encourage those three governments to stop funding the terror within Afghanistan and the Taliban. So,
yeah. And Pakistan was there from the onslaught, from the beginning of the creation of the Taliban. So, of course, in addition to what's happening now, they're obviously involved. Caleb had this tweet, and I just wanted to read it because I agree with his take wholeheartedly. He said, don't make the same mistake leftists made after 9/11. The Taliban is not Ho Chi Minh. Chaos and sectarian violence does not benefit the global anti-imperialist axis, because a lot of people think because there's chaos and now the U.S. is out, then this is, a win for imperialism, against imperialism. He said, this is not defeat for imperialism. This is a planned strategic shift and scheduled planned handoff. And right under him, actually, Arxie Marcis commented, you won't see it, but I'll just say, she said, yeah, the Taliban already agreed to allow U.S. corporations in Afghanistan, which is highly suspect. It is. That's my whole point. I don't think that the U.S. is just going to get out of there without having some sort of strategy. And another thing he did mention, which is the last thing in this section, is his analysis of what's next for Afghanistan. I suspect the U.S. has made some sort of arrangement with Taliban after years of negotiation. U.S. has been keeping Afghanistan unstable, so the terrorism and drug gangs spill over into Iran, Russia, and China. This wasn't defeat. This was a handoff. So I agree with his analysis on that. I think we'll see what happens, but I firmly think if the U.S. is allowing corporations in there, if the U.S. is going to have certain troops remain there, I don't think that this is like a legitimate, the radical Taliban are taking over. I think there is some sort of push and backing from the United States in this. It's way too quickly. And the reason it happened so quickly is because I think this has been coming for a long time. So we'll see what happens, fam. But yeah.